Hey everyone. Today on the Rising Digital Leaders Show, we have Simone Petrella joining us. She's the CEO of CyberVista, a cybersecurity education company. Simone brings a fierce viewpoint on the state of education for technology professionals. I think you'll resonate with the leaps of faith she's taken over the course of her career. I really admire how she follows her interests and intuitions, all the way up to co-founding a cybersecurity company and now leading it. Today you'll learn a lot, including, number one, what's changing in modern education, including technical certifications, and what that means for digital professionals. Number two, we'll touch on the power of new education models centered on community and accountability. Number three, we'll look at how CyberVista's approach aims to measure a person's evolving skill set. Number four, Simone then invokes a Napoleon-era military strategist. I love this, as she highlights the importance of preserving optionality in your career. And lastly, she shares how parenting has changed her professional worldview. So much goodness here. Please enjoy. Welcome to the Rising Digital Leaders Show. I am your host, Matthew Doan. Today's organizations are powered by digital capabilities, cloud, data science, cybersecurity, and much more. To be competitive, we must have tech-savvy leaders steering the ships. But these people don't come out of thin air. We must develop them. This show is for the technical experts of the world, those brave souls that feel unheard and lost in the crowd, but know they were born to lead. We need you to rise, to become impactful digital leaders. In these episodes, we help you undergo a self-transformation, developing the mindset and skill set that'll massively enhance your abilities, influence, and career potential. We take a different approach, pulling in lessons from philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, and history to enrich the professional and personal aspects of your life. Thank you for your time. Please subscribe to the Rising Digital Leaders Show. Now, let's dig in. Simone Petrella, welcome to the Rising Digital Leaders Show.
Thank you, Matt. It's good to be here.
I'm so excited to have you and bring you to our audience. So for those that don't know Simone, she is the CEO of CyberVista, a cyber training and education company, and we'll unpack that as we go here. But to really dive into things, I just like to get quick started here. Simone, you work with a lot of boards of directors and CEOs. I'm wondering if you might be able to share the most absurd experience you've had in the boardroom.
Ooh. So I thought about this question, a little bit, and the weirdest experience I had with a board was one of the first companies that we worked with and their board. And it was actually an international company. So they were based out of Costa Rica. And we actually traveled down to do what ostensibly was cybersecurity risk training for the board in Costa Rica. And so we'd gone through a whole presentation and we have everyone around the room. There are some people virtually dialing in from the United States because they do have some US board members. And at the end of the whole presentation, the first question that I got was from one of the board members who asked, well, what do we do if one of our board members or one of the executives of the company is kidnapped? Like physically kidnapped and taken away, and what do we do? Which in the context of today and ransomware puts a whole other blush on the whole conversation. And I was completely and utterly floored. I had no idea what to say. I was like, I don't know. I deal in the digital world. There's no one's ever has a HUD over their head and taken into a car to some location. I don't know what to tell you. Contact law enforcement, not. So I think that was by far the most bizarre experience that I've had in a board. And I can't sit here and tell you I gave a very good answer because I was completely taken aback.
Oh, man. The weirdest things come up at the same time, the very real situations, because what do you do if that happens in real life and the company's at stake, that you've got your leadership out there, and what do you do next?
Yeah. I mean, and it was very striking because clearly that was something that would have an impact, and just based on where they were located and some of the crime, that's not a implausible scenario for them to have to plan through.
Yeah. All the importance of doing exercises of every types, right? Plan for every possible scenario. Imagine all the bads in this world and make sure that you've got a game plan and you've thought through it.
Exactly.
I'm interested as well when we're talking about boards here. You've got a lot of expertise. When you think about the importance of technology, and things have changed a lot, especially since COVID, but even in the last couple of years before that, what are boards getting right with technology today? Are they thinking about it in a good, healthy way?
Yeah, I think what boards are getting right is the fact that technology is an imperative and top priority in the kind of survivability of all of their businesses. And if they were lagging on that recognition before COVID hit, they're certainly not now, because in the blink of an eye, everyone had to make sure they had a technology infrastructure to ensure continuity of operations. And how do you do that securely? And how do you become more efficient? Or how do you think about your business differently if you weren't necessarily a technology enabled business? So I think that boards have certainly embraced the reality that technology has kind of, brought into their businesses, and they appreciate that. Even if they're not experts in it, and certainly are putting a higher premium on making sure that they have the right executives to help them think about their technology transformations and all of those other components, for sure. So I think that they're getting that part right.
I hope so. I mean, it's come a long way since where it used to be, where you'd have a CIO at best would get called on once a quarter to give the state of the IT infrastructure. And when something bad would happen, a security lead, a CISO would be called upon and say, explain yourself, what's going wrong here? And how do we make things better? It seems more and more, and would love your take though, that we're looking to these technology leaders, these digital folks, to actually propel the business forward, whether it's accomplishing a mission, adding to a healthy bottom line. Are you seeing them start to view technology as something that is really core to giving customers what they want?
I think the boards do at a high level. A little challenging is they're looking to C-suite and executive leaders who have those kind of highly technical backgrounds and experience, and then they're kind of expecting those leaders to have the business acumen and perspective to help them understand how technology can enable their business. Because the boards know that they don't have the technology and the technical expertise, but they understand the business drivers. And then they're looking to kind of impart talent to help them execute on that, who maybe has the technical expertise, but not necessarily all the business context. So there is a dichotomy there. I think there's an appreciation and recognition, but I don't necessarily think that we collectively have gotten the execution right.
Yeah, there's a long way to go. But at least it's a promising upswing that we're bringing these people into the fold and giving them more of a voice because they're so critical to it all.
Yeah.
Would like to point next towards the topic of education with you. I know this is near and dear to your heart and CyberVista's mission. One thing I'd like to go just a little zoomed out for a second, go a little meta if we could, is Kaplan. Kaplan having a storied history in education, of course, and being part of CyberVista. Would love for you to help us understand, Kaplan's role with CyberVista, but more importantly, how has education evolved in the last 100 years or so, and what does that mean for today?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of questions there to unpack, but I think to at least kind of give the relationship and the genesis of the relationship between Kaplan and CyberVista, CyberVista and Kaplan share a parent company. We're both under the Graham Holdings portfolio, which if you are in the DC area and the Washington Post, the paper used to be the Washington Post company before it was sold to Jeff Bezos. And so, Kaplan, from their history, has been kind of at the forefront from how do you do everything from, test preparation, but as they evolved over time, how is it not just training high school students to take an SAT test so that they could get into college and meet aspirational goals, but then evolved into what are professional levels of training that people need. The most common are, like the finance world for Series 7 or CFA exam or real estate licensing exams, as well as nursing examinations, things like that, all kind of fell within this broad mandate that Kaplan was trying to do to say, how do you kind of professionally align to the aspirational job potential that individuals have? But I think what's most interesting, and I say this as someone who doesn't have a background in education, I come from the cybersecurity, industry and the DoD by my own background, and kind of have found my way into education. What I think is the most interesting thing about Kaplan and their approach to education is they were in many ways at the forefront of the evolution into online learning, which a lot of us talk about this in context of COVID and how everything went online. But this migration into a 21st century learning environment where you are doing things in a location that doesn't require you to go to a campus or go to even an on-site classroom. The fact that you can actually do more creative methodologies around modality of learning and create an experience that's broader based than a traditional classroom experience, and kind of how do you do that in that convenient online way? That's something that they pioneered, 20 years ago. And so when CyberVista was founded, we're a sister company to Kaplan, but we have really leveraged that 20 plus year history of what they've learned in bringing education online in an effective and efficient way, and have tried to bring that into the cybersecurity space in particular, because, that's, I think, one of the areas that I was very striking to me when I got onto the kind of talent development professional services side of things with CyberVista was, having been in the cybersecurity industry, I think I took for granted that as technical as a field as it is, the majority of people got their professional development through pretty draconian ways of education and training, like an instructor with a PowerPoint set of slides, and maybe they got to do some stuff online. So kind of ironic if you think about it. But so, I'll that's kind of like where the Kaplan part fits in. But what I think that it says about education and how that's changed over the last 100 years is really fascinating, because I think education is going through a massive transformation right now. And it had been happening, and it had been bubbling beneath the surface for a while. There had been, you'd hear inklings around what's the real ROI of an undergraduate degree or education, especially if you're not in a tier 1 university, because you're still paying at a private university extremely high tuition rates. And are you necessarily guaranteed a job at the end of it? No. And then what you're seeing as the market and the service economy continues to increase is that a lot of these graduates, even when they get that degree, are not necessarily qualified for the jobs that they're kind of looking to fill in the actual market, because so much has kind of become dependent on skill. And the parallel I like to draw the most, and this predates kind of Kaplan, but they do a lot in the medical field, is like 100 years ago when we trained doctors from an educational standpoint. It was kind of like just through apprenticeships, right? Like you went to, like when you were in New York and you were interested in being a doctor, you trained under someone who was also a doctor or medical practitioner, and you learned from job shadowing and training. There wasn't like a formal program. And obviously that was going to be a very different education and experience than if you went to a rural part of the country and trained under someone who was a doctor there. So there was like a big movement, a century ago, or I don't know the exact date, to essentially kind of revamp the entire medical education field, because they were like, people are dying. We don't have a consistent standard for what it means to actually be qualified to be a doctor. And I think that kind of education more broadly is kind of going through this reckoning of like, okay, well, obviously life and limb is not at stake in every field people look to go into, but what really makes someone qualified to do a job? What is the economy looking for as far as people, and how can we service them? And I think universities are struggling in that regard because they have to prove their own value. Companies are struggling because it's certainly not their initial mandate or mission to have to create their own talent, and yet in some ways they're being forced to do it. So it's very much in flux right now.
Education is going through such a revolution in a sense right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always wrestling with what it could be. I would love for you to comment on one thing in particular in the technology world. So whether you're in IT, cyber analytics, there's just tons of certifications, right? And this is often the credential that you prove yourself as worthy, right? You go up the chain getting higher and higher certifications. And that's often used as a way to qualify with different employers. Now, I've seen a lot of revolt against that online. If you look at some of the threads on LinkedIn or Twitter, people are canceling their certifications. And I'm wondering, from where you sit, how do you interpret this movement? Or is it something we should pay attention to, or will it pass?
I don't think it's passing. I think it's a long time coming. I think what is a struggle is what is there to replace it. And there is not a singular answer on what comes next when you cancel the certification. And so we're in this weird period right now. And I'll be very truthful. And I say this as someone who, has founded and runs a company where we do provide training for certifications. But I would say, as a general rule, I'm even anti-certification, because if you put yourself in the shoes of an employer, a certification is, at least today, indicative that someone has certainly taken the proactive steps to train for something. They have some baseline level of knowledge and interest in the subject, and they've been competent enough to pass it. But it does not tell me if they're going to be competent in their job or able to perform the tasks that I want them to in their job. And I think that people are recognizing that, like individuals, because now we're in this world where, depending on the employer, they're saying, well, certifications are not sufficient. We need to have a better understanding of your competency and your capability to do this job. And at the same time, they're saying, but I have nothing else to do. Like, I have no other way to even kind of screen for this or identify what else, like what other mechanism I have to make sure someone's competent. So we kind of default back to it, or for compliance reasons, you want to kind of keep it there. And I think that's really frustrating for a lot of people who have the certifications or are going to get them, because they're kind of stuck in this, well, I need one to get in the door, but it's not a guarantee. So if I make this investment in the certification, I may get an interview, but it's not going to guarantee me the job. And so then is it really worth the investment I made in myself there? So I would say that actually, like, that kind of evolution or revolution is happening literally before our eyes. I had done a bit of like independent research on this a number of years ago, just in the IT and like cybersecurity sector. So I didn't even go into broad-based IT. I stayed primarily in the security realm of topics. And I stopped counting after 84 certifications that you could go and achieve if you wanted to go collect 84 certifications. And like I said, I don't even want to know how many more you would tack on top of that if you went to the entirety of the IT realm too. So what does that mean, right? When you have so many, whose means something.
Yeah, it's tough. I compare that to a trend I see right now, which is kind of the anti-certification, anti-degree realm. There's a lot of venture funding right now going into this idea of cohort-based courses. There was actually a new program. It's actually funded a little bit by Andreessen Horowitz and a few others, called Maven. And it's about taking some of the preeminent people in this field in different disciplines, whether it's women in leadership, whether it's how to be a creator online, digital marketing, something more technical like an engineering type path, and actually bring people through these intense 6-week sprint type courses where you're in a community like you would be at a college classroom, all online, but it promotes community and accountability. You build the professional network, but you're all in it together. So you're doing the work, you're doing live Zoom sessions, all pushing each other to be greater and greater. And what you can claim at the end of it is, well, one, I've gone through the course. It might not be an accredited thing like you've seen in yesteryear, but it's something you can put on LinkedIn. It's something you can talk to people about. You can list it on a resume. More importantly, hopefully you've got something that you can demonstrate new skill with. And I like to believe that, especially as you've gone through the entry-level certifications, maybe passing just a low bar, then you can start doing things like this, which is truly about upping your game rather than being compliant with job recs.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that resonates with me 100%. because I think that the accountability you get in an experience of going through something with other people, even if it is in an online environment, is incredibly powerful, and you can't kind of wish that away, even though we've come so far. And I think that, ultimately you can, if you harness that with the power of what you can also give people experientially in an online environment, that's incredibly powerful. I'm also biased though, because that's kind of our approach too in the cybersecurity training space.
Yeah. Could you unpack that a little bit for us and really what CyberVista is trying to do in the market?
Yeah, I mean, our whole philosophy is driven by this idea that the way that we have identified and trained cybersecurity professionals in kind of traditional settings is ultimately wrong. And it is, we've taken this very individualistic approach to send someone to training because either it's a incentive as a reward or a retention kind of mechanism, or we send them to the training, and when you kind of get them back into the workplace, you can't answer the question like, are they better at their job? Is Matt any better at his job because I invested, a few $1,000s for you to go to a training, a conference, like you name whatever the activity is. So we have a metrics-driven approach that we believe that you can actually upskill and train someone, and that is important and developmentally beneficial to them, but it also increases the cost efficiency and the overall security of the organization, because you can actually tie the investment you made into people into their ability to do their jobs, right? Like, the example I always kind of say in the cybersecurity realm is we love to talk about people, process, and technology. Everyone likes to talk about it in every area, but we really like to talk about it in security. And we spend a lot of time talking about technology and process, and no one really likes to talk about the people or what we're doing to make sure that the people are capable of doing all of the implementation of that policy, like that process and technology. And even furthermore, we don't have a way to actually measure it, even though we want the metrics coming out of every other mechanism in our technology and our network scans and everything else. And while that's happening, people and headcount is literally the biggest expense that any security team has. I don't care how many tools that you've purchased. You are spending more on headcount than you are on any tool or any consulting firm. So that's kind of like what drives our approach and philosophy. So we have this data-driven approach that kind of starts with assessments, but then has a cohort-based accountability learning engagement to it, so that you have those checkpoints along the way, and then you can measure the improvement over time, and then all that gets reported back to leadership so they can make some informed decisions, but also gives the individuals, again, something that they can put on LinkedIn, have a badge, talk about, have a community around the experience. So it's good for them and it's good for the company.
Yeah, I love you're catching the waves of how education is shifting and making it work with an actual business model. And I would hope that for the listeners out there, say if it's a 32-year-old ambitious technology professional, maybe in cyber and analytics, and you're listening to this today, you take to heart that if you want to elevate your game, you don't necessarily need the premier certification. You definitely don't need the MBA. Don't even get me started on the value of that. There's other ways to up your game without a couple $100,000 in 2 years of your life. I know people have their opinions on that, but
Right.
There's alternative models to rapidly enhance your mindset and skill set. It's more affordable, it's faster, and just pay attention to what's out there. There's new ways of getting to where you want to be, and the gatekeepers of yesterday, I think, are loosening some of their grips. You see this at a lot of employers, particularly tech firms, but even like banking institutions. They're starting to look differently at what qualifies someone as capable for these roles, even the more advanced ones. So watch the education space, watch what Simone and CyberVista are doing. There's a lot of movement afoot, and this could be to your benefit if you're tracking it. Next piece, Simone, talk a little bit about you and your journey. So you've blazed an interesting and winding path: international relations, law, Department of Defense, counterterrorism. How has this informed what you're doing today?
Ooh, I think, the fact that it has been so winding, and yet has exposed me to different pieces of what all connect together is probably the most kind of illustrative thing that I've taken out of my path. Because, starting in counterterrorism and in the Department of Defense, it was not just what do you know about a particular terrorist group, a cell, even a particular high value target, but was like, how does this fit into our national security strategy? What does this actually mean for a decision maker? So I was, I think, forced in that experience to kind of have that, you can be very tunnel visioned and looking only at one set of details, but you sometimes have to kind of pop your head up and take into account what the broader strategic goal is. And I think as I found my way into like the tech areas and in law, every decision that I've made has kind of been like, yeah, maybe it's a little bit ancillary to what I'm ultimately trying to achieve, but I'm still moving forward. And so that's kind of guided my philosophy of experiences. It's like every new experience is something that you can kind of add on to a foundation of knowledge, and that broadens your perspective. And as long as you can find the common thread that kind of keeps it thematic, I think it serves you well, as opposed to if I had totally like jumped and gone into, baking and opening a pastry shop. Like, I don't know if I would have had the same answer to that. So I was very deliberate around those different experiences and things that I pursued, not because I had one singular goal in mind, but I knew that it was something I was interested and passionate about, and that they collectively would build upon each other.
Makes total sense. The way you about your journey, it comes to life. Like, you're a real systems thinker. You're able to connect the dots and then always make sure that that's informing your next steps. It actually reminds me of a quote from a philosopher named Simone, and he always said, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards, right? So you can only start to connect the dots and make sense of it in your journey when you look back at it. Yeah. But all the while, you're just using your best instinct and intuition and just kind of your North Star compass to say, what's the next best decision? Is going from counterterrorism to cybersecurity a great move? Is going to be a founder of this new company a great move? And you're making it work, and you look back at it and you're probably like, this is my journey. I love my journey.
Yeah. Someone very wise, and I think it kind of also, this is a little bit of me shedding some light on my DoD days. It's a very famous author, so Clausewitz, who writes on war theory and talks about always having your exit strategies. And so I think when I've always moved forward, I've always been having one part of my eye and one part of my ear thinking, okay, well, if I do this next thing in my career, if I pursue this opportunity, or if I get this training, or if I do this thing for myself, or I put myself in this situation, what are the possible options that I can I kind of parlay out of it? Not one, maybe there's many. And it's actually kind of the optionality is part of what's kind of a guiding principle to make that next step, because I don't know all the time.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing. Creating options for yourself, not tying yourself into just one path. It also makes me think about what they do at Amazon. One of the principles that Jeff Bezos talks about is trying to make reversible decisions. So oftentimes we think our decisions are irreversible, but most of them you can walk backwards, or at least learn from and not be held into it. So if you're making decisions for yourself that give you options or are reversible, you're doing a lot of good for your life and creating a good path forward. Separate personal question for you. I know you are a mother, and I would love to understand how being a mother has influenced you both personally and professionally.
Yeah. I think that, as someone who definitely focused maniacally on my career for the better part of my professional life, and putting off becoming a parent by, I think, like a lot of standard expectations or definitions, becoming one personally is, I would say, probably the most humbling and selfish experience that I've had. And I say selfish in the best possible way, because it was really eye-opening to give me perspective on how much more there is to life than just trying to pursue a particular professional goal. And I think that perspective actually has kind of translated over to what I've learned professionally, because I think as a leader and a founder and someone who's trying to build a company and a business, it's given me more empathy to understand that everyone is going through a series of life circumstances, events, and everyone's living their life, and work is only one facet of what are ultimately multifaceted. Everyone has a multifaceted existence, whether it be family or other passions or whatever else it is. So it's given me a lot more empathy to say, how do you build the infrastructure and the basis of something that's strong that still honors that kind of existence and like the human experience? Because I think that we're inherently as humans driven by this desire to grow things and kind of create value, but also meaning. And there's a lot of meaning that can grow from kind of working on something that, I know I feel very passionate about, but it's not just because I feel passionate about the topic in itself. It's like, what do you leave to future generations? So I think maybe that sounds too hippy dippy, but I think it's really kind of put it into perspective when I even think about like what are you building? Why are you building it? And provides a lot of motivation, but also that check to say, and sometimes you have to kind of like turn the light off at the end of the day and go home and be with your family, because they're only going to be this age once, right? Like he's never going to be younger than he is today, and he's never going to be older than he was today.
I'm in full alignment with you. I love that perspective. As a father of four, I really believe that when you go through that transformation, and it really brings you to a different point in your life, it helps you understand, put things in perspective, want to live more of a life of purpose. Be very careful in what you're saying yes to, because more than ever, it's a life of trade-offs, because things you can do, you have certain work experiences that you can spend time on. It better be really well worth it, because then you're trading off time with family. And more importantly, I think your value system just goes through this shape shifting, and you start to view work differently, and you want to make sure that it's doing good in the world, just like you want to make your children be good in this world too. Wonderful point of view. I have a few rapid fire questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's do it. So, given that you're in the education space within the cyber world, what's an education myth that needs to be busted?
I think that it needs to be busted that academic institutions and third parties are the ones responsible for giving people an education.
Great point of view. I think that validates a lot of what we were talking about earlier and the shifting tides with it all. So this is the Rising Digital Leaders Show. What does digital mean to you?
I think digital means the entire kind of transformative experience of a new way of kind of existing. It's transforming the way we work because technology enables it. It is transforming the way that we connect as communities because we're able to make the world so much smaller because you can use digital mechanisms to actually reach people across the globe. I think it's such an all-encompassing term in so many ways that it's probably so broad that it's hard to even like pinpoint. But I think that it really does kind of equate to transformation and a transformative experience to me, because we're in this crazy time. I mean, whoever thought that we would see, independent private companies going up to space on a regular basis, or launching satellites that are going to somehow give internet to the world. So I think that just that entire kind of technology revolution that we're living through is all things digital.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I was very intentional in wanting to use the term digital because I feel like the word technology is becoming more and more of a boxed term where you're putting people who might be working with code in a very small space or working with infrastructure or whatever it might be. But the idea of living more digital, of bringing things like technology knowledge to the forefront of a business to change a business model, to change the good you're trying to do in the world. I mean, even look at like the NFT movement and all how that's changing how you sell products and services in this world. Jack Dorsey sells his first tweet for millions. Whoever saw that coming? But that's a big thing that we need to think about at the highest levels of our organizations. What does this digital transformation in the world mean for us? How do we bring our technically minded people from maybe a back office position to the forefront, to the boardroom, to help set strategy, to guide where we're going as an overall organization?
Yeah, I do think that the term digital and the fact that you explained your explanation that way is also really interesting because, what comes to my mind is I think that in order to actually embrace this kind of digital world that we live in, technology is becoming the language or the currency by which you operate in. So it's not just the ends in itself. Like it's not just technology, but it is kind of the common language you have to apply to all those different circumstances and scenarios.
Yeah, spot on. So the pandemic, it's June 2021 as we're recording right now, well over a year into this. How has it tested you as a CEO, as a leader?
Well, I think it's tested me the most by I am a 100% extrovert. And so I feed off of the body language and reactions of my team and the people I have customers and I work with, and having to go completely into a world where everything is overscheduled out and takes, in my opinion, 10 times longer than it has to because I can't walk over to someone and just say, hey, Matt, like, how do we, let's take 10 minutes and like work through this. I think that's been my personal biggest challenge because I'm just so wired that way. But I think then the second biggest challenge was just actually, I would say, it really made me rethink my workforce and who we hired and who we brought on during the last year because we were able to tap into talent in places that aren't geographically where we're headquartered. And so we embraced this idea of being remote. And I think it was a overall positive thing for us, but it was a huge challenge. It's still a huge challenge to say, then how do you kind of create an experience where you have remote people, not remote people? How do you kind of maintain a set of collaboration without excluding others? How do you kind of create even ground? And I think that's, I have a small company, but I know that, even the largest companies out there, whether they're the Googles or the JP Morgans, are like grappling with too. And I empathize. It is definitely, I think, the biggest challenge that we've kind of faced on that front.
Yeah, we certainly know there's no going back to the way it used to be. So I think it's very much on every organization to figure out what it means for them. To your point earlier, we have options. People have preferences. We've seen different ways of making it work now. How are we as individual organizations going to customize it for our customers, for our culture, and make sure that it's as thriving as possible? If you go back in time, or actually just imagine for a second, if you were starting your career right now in 2021, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, wow. I think the advice I would give myself is to explore everything that you find interesting, even if you don't know exactly what career opportunity that immediately translates into. Because when I started my career, I didn't even know the job I do now existed. Like no one in, the guidance office or the career office at, Georgetown University said, oh yeah, like here's what it's like to be in cybersecurity. And here's like no one, not even a little bit. So I think that I would say be open to everything that interests you and know that that can probably turn into a career. And then meet as many people as possible who do as many things that are interesting and different to you, and see if you can see yourself in that kind of path or shoe, just to try it on, if you will, like try on a few different things that you wouldn't necessarily think are traditional career routes. That's what I would tell myself.
And I see you living that. So it's validation. Well said. Well said. A few closing questions for you, Simone. One is, how do you rise each day?
I rise to my Alexa going off, and I make a very strong cup of coffee, and you should not talk to me for 20 minutes. And then I, generally speaking, have to get as quick of a workout in as possible before a 3-year-old starts demanding breakfast. So I would say more chaotically than I would like it to be, but coffee first.
You've got foundations in order. Makes total sense.
Yeah.
How can people connect with you online?
They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Find me at Simone Petrella. They can follow me on Twitter at Simone Petrella, or certainly reach out and check out CyberVista at www.cybervista.net.
Wonderful. And lastly, what closing message would you want to leave with our audience today?
I would say that the biggest thing is don't listen to people who tell you can't do something or that something is, not going to be in the realm of the possible. If you want it bad enough, then you should give it every shot in the world to execute and kind of make your dream a reality. And that, sometimes it is really scary, whether it's finding that first new job or making a big switch. It's this idea that you have to let go of the branch that you're kind of hanging on to before you can actually even reach out and get the new one. And so I know it can be scary, but I think to our conversation earlier around optionality, like it's not, you can always course correct. Like you can fail. It's okay to fail. You just learn from it and move on. So don't be so afraid to fail that you essentially don't ever do the thing that you really want to do.
Great points. Couldn't have said it better myself. Simone, thanks for putting a bow on our conversation today. Love talking with you. Hope to do more of this in the future. You're doing great work with CyberVista. You're a trailblazer in the education space for our technology folks. So thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
It was fun. Enjoyed it.
This is your host, Matthew Doan. Thank you for listening to the Rising Digital Leaders Show. Again, my mission is to help you elevate your career as a digital leader and live a thriving life. I hope this episode sparks new thinking and helps you take meaningful action in your world. If you enjoyed the experience, I'd be so grateful if you subscribed and left a 5-star review. That's it for now. Until next time, my friends, stay virtuous.